Welcome to the Demystifying Technology podcast from the MacLaurin Group.
Typically, you go through the due diligence process. What the world of private equity?
Right. Can't wait. Demystify it. Welcome to the Demystifying Technology podcast from the MacLaurin Group. We've got Jim Headley and Alan Williamson here.
Hello, Alan.
Season 1, Episode 1. Here we go. We're off to the races.
Loving it.
How exciting. Right. Well, the good news is while we're recording it, we don't necessarily hear our own voices, so we're not completely self-conscious about everything.
Sweet. Thank you for that.
But I am looking into your eyes lovingly at this point.
Really? What do you see there?
I'm seeing somebody that's fearful of technical due diligence.
Well, daggone how you are so perceptive.
I tell you. So we've done a number of these now under our new banner, the MacLaurin Group, but we've all been involved in them for many, many years previously. So let's have a chat about what a technical due diligence is and, more importantly, what it is not. So tell me from your perspective how you found it.
So I will start with Jim's history of due diligence. My first exposure to this was with an organization I was employed by, heading up their data and analytics group, and we were going out for a round of investment, and various due diligence companies, various private equity firms were evaluating us for that investment, and I was the recipient for a few of these due diligence rounds for providing that information, the information they needed to evaluate the organization. So that was really my first exposure to it, and I really didn't like it from that end of the.
And what was your perception of it before you got to that? Like what was your?
I had
who
none.
told you to say?
Really, I had none going into it. I understood there was a lot riding on it, so it was fairly intimidating from that regard. And not only did I have a lot riding on it, but more importantly, everybody in the organization had a lot riding on it. This will determine how viable your organization is and what value somebody else will place on it. So you're very cautious not to share the number one, erroneous information, but also to make sure that what you're providing is relevant and is going to help drive an understanding and a fair assessment of the value.
And so you went through a number of these, and there was probably different styles and different types of people that came in, both the private equity partners themselves, but also they'll often hire specialists that if they don't have that specific expertise in that field that they're asking for, they'll bring in an external people. We sometimes liken it to a home inspection report when you're buying and selling a house. While we all think we're the best judges of houses, it takes a specialist to come in and crawl in under the floor space and the roof space and check everything to make sure everything's working. And really that's what a technical due diligence is on that respect. Now, from that perspective, though, how were the different styles that you were exposed to? And clearly you didn't enjoy the experience sitting on that side of the table at the time. And I know I've been on the same receiving end from time to time too. But from what was your biggest takeaway from that?
I would say there were at the two ends of the spectrum, there was the very scripted, I'm going to run down this list of questions that you are going to answer for me. And I would liken it to the Bobs coming into the office in office space. And it just, I found that it was probably far less effective for them and for me. And then the other end of the spectrum is, more conversational. It's more a sharing of insight and at the end of it, you really didn't realize you had been involved in a due diligence. You were just sharing what you had done, what you knew, and what you felt the future opportunities or priorities should be for the organization.
Yeah, and I think that's a very common experience. Like you do have those that come in with their Excel spreadsheets and they're going down a list and they're writing out every single word you say, and it feels very robotic, impersonal, and in many respects it feels like a deposition.
Right, it does. It's an interrogation, and at the end of it, I'm wondering, did they put on a rubber glove, or was I supposed to bring that? Who supplies that?
And well, the problem with those ones are that you definitely start to feel nervous and you start questioning the answers that you give before you're thinking, if I'd answered yes to that instead of no, then I would have null and voided a whole series of questions here, because that really wasn't as severe as what I probably painted it out to be, and now I've got myself into a bit of a corner here that suddenly this issue has become bigger than it really is.
Right.
Sort of stuff.
It's implicit that there is a wrong and a right answer in that format, and that isn't the case in due diligence, right? It's here's the reality, and at the end of it, you would hope to understand and get the insight relative to what is it that as an investor, am I going to have to deal with once I've got these folks under my wing? Is there a need for investment in the platform because the platform's archaic? Do they claim to have a data warehouse, but really what they have is a dump of their online transactional processing platform that serves as an archive for that data? And it just informs what's my long-term strategic objective and what is it going to cost me to get them where I need them.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, the buyer has a goal in mind for what they want the company to do, and in many respects, they may not share what that plan is, but they want to be able to kick the tires to make sure that this can do what it needs to do. So, for example, if they decide that they can augment it with another company in their portfolio, how is the technology adaptable in such a way that they could integrate these two systems? Are the two stacks even compatible with each other? But also, they'll also look to make sure that any claims that were laid down in the original sales deck can be substantiated. If we say we've got X million rows of data in a particular database for going back 10 years for a given sample set, then we really want to see what that looks like just to make sure that we've got it right.
So I've shared with you what I felt on the other end of that. I know you've been on the opposite side of that table, initiating the conversation and, for lack of a better term, asking the questions. How do you get past that sense of trepidation and intimidation that as the due diligencee, you're less likely to open up?
It's a great question. I have to say, I learned at the feet of the master, which was Jim Milbury.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, he's an interesting chap.
The man in black?
Yeah, he really, truly is. But no, he has a wonderful way of making you feel horrendously comfortable, and and it's not that he's interrogating you; he's genuinely looking to get at the reality of the situation. We're not there to judge. We're not there to rate or to rank. We're there to get what are we going to have to manage with at the end of the day once we've made this sale. And to that end, going down a list of questions doesn't work ever. And for the very reasons that you cited earlier on. So you really want to find what it is that they want to tell you. So you get them excited, you get people to show off a little bit. No matter who you're talking to, they'll have done something in that company that they're horrendously proud of. And that's what you want to get them talking about. Because how they talk about that informs how they think about the organization as a whole. And how they treat others in their team, how they treat people up the way as well as down the way. And you want them to feel comfortable that you're not there as their interrogator, but you're there as possibly your savior. That, okay, we're going to work together post-sale to get this thing moving forward, right? So you start the conversation in a very positive and a very sort of proactive manner. It's like, okay, I'm in the trenches with you. Give me the reality of the trenches, and let's figure out how best we can come out of these trenches. Now, in the back of your head, you're going through, a question list. It's not really questions, they're more pointers as to what is it I need to find out. Two classic areas that you want to figure out is there any big, gnarly legacy system sitting out there that is still powering the system but is working in outdated technology that if we decided to sort of grow the team 10x, there's no way we're going to find, say, COBOL developers or Power Builder developers. It's just not going to happen. And likewise, is there any key individuals in the organization that they're the only ones that know how everything works? And in sort of long-term older companies that have never been through this transaction, it's very common to find that one person, oh, Joe knows how to do everything. He always restarts stuff. I don't know how he does it. He never writes anything down because he's just always there.
So why is that so relevant?
Because it ultimately means that we can't scale beyond Joe. We need to get that person's knowledge in paper somewhere or distributed amongst other people. And we then have to figure out how crucial is Joe to the success of this company.
Well, and I would think that, in some cases it's company size can dictate that, where you have your IT department as a guy, right? And in some cases it's Joe is creating his fiefdom and is protecting his realm. How do you deal with that and break through that?
Well, that's a whole different podcast, to be frank with you. But the first thing is identifying which type of personality is Joe.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky, then we'll get to talk to Joe. And that could be something as informal as taking him out to drinks or having lunch with him just to say, hey, how you doing? And getting to know his motivations. Because sometimes you'll find that he just simply hasn't been listened to for a long time. And he's just dug his heels in and he's doing what he can do to make the best of a bad situation. And if one was to throw some resources at him or throw some money at him, he may indeed have all the answers. It doesn't often happen, but you got to hear people out to see if indeed there is the best answer sitting down.
So when you're doing a due diligence, how far into the organizational hierarchy how deep into that do you typically get?
That will depend on the deal and the deal size. Many times you don't get too far down the chain because they don't want everybody to know that they're within a deal. If the company's really small, then it's very hard to hide that, so therefore everybody gets to talk. The larger the company, interestingly enough, you sort of stop at a given level. But you will often get to speak to the sort of the key people that know what they're talking about, i.e. they're not just repeating other technology buzzwords that you know fine well. You don't really know the understanding of that.
Right.
Yeah, we're on the cloud, and we've been on the line
for
a long many of years.
I've heard it.
Yes. So you say, no, we want to go past that chap.
Right.
And talk to the one below that. And it's okay for the due diligence team to sort of recognize that this may not be the right person we're talking to and ask for another resource. You're not going to get to interview everybody. You're not going to get to talk to everybody. You simply don't have the time. And it wouldn't yield you that much more data anyway. You want to get a general feel for how this thing is going to work. But again, key thing is to sort of speak to, key engineering staff, which is mostly your managers, to make sure that what's their philosophy on stack management, employee recruitment, employee work development, just general keeping up to date with technology and what have you. Have they got any big ideas, any big plans that they're itching to go after? Also asking them what big problems did you hit in the last sort of 12 months and how did you resolve them and what you do? But you don't ask them in sort of like as directly as I just asked you that sort of question.
Right.
It's more, that comes out in sort of conversational. You sort of lead yourself up to those sort of conversations.
As of late, I've had the opportunity to participate on, I've previously had experience on the other side of the due diligence. Now I have experience as the inquisitor, so to speak, but it's not always at the behest and request of a private equity firm looking to do the due diligence. What I found surprising was that the organizations, the companies that are considering or seeking investment will occasionally ask for this. What is the motivation behind that? Why would an organization, subject themselves to this?
It's a great question, and I've also seen it in the past where we've helped new leadership get a pulse check on what's going on too. So a new CEO comes in, takes over. They have no clue what's really going on. So they'll sometimes do what is considered it's still a technical due diligence, but it's a sort of quiet audit in many respects, State of the Union, sort of, where am I? What's my engineering group is? And to have that third-party impartial person to come in, have a look around. And one of the things that I'm very conscious of, and again, you're not there to find problems. those problems will find themselves in terms of they will highlight themselves. You're not going in there being the sort of the picky bastard trying to figure out, I'm going to nitpick at every absolute possible thing, and if it's not done my way, it's the wrong way. And there's definitely due diligence teams that I've come across that are very much that style of doing it. I like to find sort of the celebrations and say, yeah, you've done a great job. While it may not have been what I would have done, you're definitely going in the right direction. Let's celebrate the fact that you've arrived at the party, no matter how late you are.
Typically, you go through this due diligence process, and you're gonna have findings. No organization's perfect.
No,
I'd like to think that I am, and I probably am, but there may be people who mistakenly think that I am not. And at the end of that, you've got this list of items. If you're doing this on the behalf of private equity, that may or may not be relevant relative to that particular deal and what the value is. But let's say they move forward anyway. The concerns you raise aren't substantial enough to dissuade them from the transaction. How does the findings from that persist after the transaction, or do they start anew at that point?
Well, I think from our perspective, we go in there not necessarily sort of report and forget. The way we sort of structure our due diligence is what would we be doing if we were taking this on going forward. So when we write up a report and put our recommendations in, we'll identify the successes, we'll always identify the shortcomings. But the shortcomings are only relative to what the buyer wants to see. So the buyer will have some objective as to where they think they're going. Or even the management will have said, okay, even if it's an internal due diligence in that respect, where they're kickstarting the process themselves, they'll still have an idea of saying, well, we've earmarked this huge amount of money that we're about to invest in engineering. Let's not tell us that that's what we're going to do, and let's see if they have come up with the same conclusions that we've done. So again, that's another validation in terms of, okay, am I spending these $2 or $3 million in the right place? So, paying somebody to come in and sort of do a what-if scenario, sort of what I'm thinking of already doing,
right,
to see if they reach the same conclusions, is again a fine example of where a technical due diligence will absolutely help you as an organization move forward on that respect. And I think from that perspective, the report then becomes far more valuable and more actionable as opposed to just looking at a list of problems.
Right.
That you can come up with. And I think that's been our vision with the MacLaurin Group is to not be the sort of the naysayers or the bringers of doom. We're bringing you something that you can actually action, and we'll work together to see what we can do here together.
Yeah, it's easy to say the baby is ugly. It's something entirely different to offer a means to beautify that baby and to improve its aesthetic appearance, because
yes,
let's face it,
all babies are ugly.
They really are.
But yeah, so fundamentally, a due diligence should be something that should not be feared, but should be welcomed. There are a number of practitioners out there that give the whole technical due diligence a bad rap, and like your own personal experience of it, the last thing you'd probably want to do is to inflict that on yourself as an internal auditing tool if you were ever to take over a CEO. So that's a bad thing to do. And I guess it's something similar to home inspection reports. Like, how many people actually get a home inspection report done in their own house? They have no intention of moving whatsoever.
Right. No, thank you.
But it would be a huge, useful thing to have every so often, maybe every 5 years, just to see, okay, what's going on here? And that's okay for a company to do as well.
Well, and one of the things that you mentioned earlier that I thought is extremely relevant is when you go into the conversation, you make sure you impress upon them that you're in the trenches with them, because on the other side of this, very likely you will be.
Very possible, yes.
And that, to me, is critical. If you're going to be standing shoulder to shoulder, it's important and deep understanding of where that organization is, and to be able to work with the leadership in place to make sure you're moving forward to where that needs to be for the next investment.
Yes, and generally speaking, I have been in the past, and we have been so far. We're open with the people that we're talking to. So if we come over a huge area of concern, somebody has just told us, we'll do it. Yeah, okay. So let me show you how that's going to play out when somebody hears this information. And so if there's a time that we smile sweetly and just nod, then it's something really big that we need to sort of think about how we're going to communicate this, but we still communicate it. I think it's important that there's an open and honesty in that respect.
Honesty. Nice. Really provides some insight into, number one, why is it so beneficial? Number two, how should you perceive that? If you're on the receiving end of this, what do you need to be aware of? And number one, first and foremost, you should be, just as you are in the rest of your life, you should be straightforward and honest, because if you're not, everybody gets it. There's the ton of things that you got to do in a day, and when I look at my house, I can list you 15 things right now that I need to address. There's not enough time in the day, so you prioritize. You take care of the big things, and you're always going to find those that somebody's always going to come in after you and say, "Yeah, you really should have painted that freaking fence post out there. It looks like crap." So, own it and say, "Yep, I get it. This is what we've been focused on." And, the point of the due diligence is to say, here's what the next step for this organization is. And maybe that fence post is important. Maybe it's not. But either way, we'll all know about it, and we'll dedicate the resources accordingly.
Well, thank you, Jim, for a wonderful episode. That was our first one. Felt good.
I felt like I learned a lot.
So did I. Where can our listeners learn more?
I would check out MacLaurin.group, where you'll find more podcasts as well as articles that are centered around demystifying technology.
Brilliant. And if you can rate us on your favorite podcast directory, iTunes and Google Play, and leave us feedback, we'd love to hear what your thoughts are. But we're excited. We've got more in the can, and there's more coming. So please subscribe.
I know I will.
Okay then. Bye.
Bye.